Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Page Turners Plus. The last time you heard from us, we were reviewing Jacob Ross's Black Rain Falling. The next time you hear from us, we'll be reviewing What Storm, What Thunder by Miriam Chansey. But today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Jacob Ross himself, and we'll be talking more with him. He is, of course, the author of Black Rain Falling and The Bone Readers, of course. Welcome, Mr. Ross.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me.
It's our
Thank you.
pleasure.
So excited to have you here with us, Jacob. I'm going to open if I may. That's very forward.
Okay.
I think I'm going to open up this morning. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
So, Black Rain Falling is the second in a series of crime novels, and I guess my real question is, why was it important to you that the Caribbean have a kind of crime novel? And on reflection, how do you think it translated the classic crime novel kind of genre into the Caribbean context?
Yeah. Thank you. It's a great question. But I think one of the great preoccupations of Caribbean people at the moment is in fact crime, and that has been the case for a very, very long time. But as I say to people when I speak about the idea for the book, I was reading a roundup of crime novels. I think and that was about 2 years before I wrote the first in the series, where almost every country on every continent was listed, with crime novels, what came out during the year, what was interesting, and not one from the Caribbean. And I was so shocked. In fact, I was quite traumatized. I got so upset. And I did a bit of research. Later on, I found one woman who I think is Jamaican, who lives in North America, and she's written a book and so on. But at the time, I didn't realize that, in fact, nobody, as far as I was concerned, was writing about Caribbean crime in the sense that satisfied me. I'm not a fiction writer. I'm not a crime fiction writer. I wasn't. But I was so worked up. I was so motivated. I decided, okay, if nobody's going to do it, I'm going to do it, because we got to be in there. For the next roundup, we've got to be in there. Interestingly, last year when the roundup came, yeah, not Grenada, the Caribbean was there, and they didn't. They kind of mentioned, Jacob was, but from the Caribbean, that was what really mattered to me. Yeah, so that's it. I mean, the Anglo-Caribbean, that is because I know. Is it Martinique, in Guadeloupe? There is a writer. I think he's English who went, lived there and became. I don't know.
Well, I think I've seen Cuban
Cuba, yes,
fiction
Cuba.
as well. Yeah.
Exactly. The guy who wrote I always forget his name. He wrote what they call the Havana series, Havana Quartet.
Right.
So you have Havana Black, Havana Red, Havana, for the English speaking or Anglo Caribbean, as I call it, we didn't have that, and I thought that it's time that we do something. It's a very interesting genre, quite legitimate. So for me, it was important to kind of make a mark, kind of say. And right now, there's so many people who are writing me from the Caribbean, Guyana, wherever, saying to me, "Well, I am going to write one. I want to write one," because they saw that it could be done, and they saw in a way how it could be done. So that was a useful intervention, I think.
But your background is in literary fiction. So
Yes,
one of the questions we have is there such a thing as literary crime fiction?
it's a great
And
question.
yeah, and
It's
do
a
your novels, how do
yeah.
you view your
To
novels?
reconcile them. I never thought that what I was writing was literary in any way. I just wanted to write a crime novel. So what I did was I teach narrative craft all over the world. I do it here at universities, at community groupings and stuff. So I understand how a novel works, and I understand how a genre novel works, and I understand what I call the understructure of the novel. So I literally studied, and I read quite a few of Raymond Chandler's, and so in my time. So in terms of the procedure, the ingredients required to write a crime novel, um, and I set about to write it. But I do have a writing style that people tend to identify as literary. I never saw my work as literary, because I do think that it could be seriously argued, whether or not crime fiction is or is not literary. I think I have seen so much so much of crime fiction that is, in my view, fascinating, can stand up to a deep analysis. Yeah, because crime fiction does something which I think it's one of the most immediate and contemporary of the genre, in the sense that it opens up possibilities and allows you to look at society in a way that is less easy to do with literary fiction. But there's a rawness to crime fiction, so you can look at the dirty underbelly of your society, which is what a lot of crime fiction, good crime fiction, and does anyway. You can interrogate society. You can ask big questions about human nature, about law and justice, and my books tend to ask a question, or sets up a tension between what is legal and what is fair, and what is just. And that's part of the struggle that my character, for example, Digger, has. Okay, it's legal, the law says you should do this, but it's not fair, if you go along with what the law dictates. And sometimes, it's like in the early part of the book, he says sometimes in order to fulfill the law, you have to break the rules. That's really part of my argument and stuff. I'll tell you what people tend to mean by literary fiction. They tend to mean that the writer pays a lot of attention to the language, yeah, to the crafting of the language. So when you read this, you get a lot of pleasure from the text itself, from reading the text. And also, a literary writer is expected to give more of character, what's happening inside. In other words, what is it that is driving the character? It's, their weaknesses, their strengths, their desires, their longings, their lacks, their, all that's the traumas, if you like. So literary fiction is expected to excavate a lot more where character is concerned. And I suspect that that's one of the reasons why they say my book is literary, because but so many of the reviews describe the novel as being character driven. It's driven by my characters. That what they do comes from inside of them. They're not out to kill anybody or beat up anybody because they just feel as beating up a man and to give a reader a thrill. They do it because they're almost compelled to do it. Something in their natures make them, for example, who is the quickest to pull a gun? Miss Stanislaus, right? Especially if it's a man who is transgressing, she will shoot him. In fact, very often Digger has to protect the criminal at times, and why is that? Once you know her history, that this is a woman who as a child had been seriously, she'd been raped by a man. She's been given a child that she does not even know how to love, and so on. When she sees a man treating a woman in a particular way, when she reacts, you remember that, yeah, she, this is how she would react because this is what she has lived through, and she knows what it means to be a woman who has been transgressed, by a man. You see what I'm saying? Digger is very protective of women. Yeah, but don't forget that his mother got killed by a policeman. Digger doesn't like police. He's a police, but he doesn't like the police. Why? Because a policeman kills his mother. So everything is shaped, and that's really what people tend to mean by literary. That it's grounded in character, and the action flows out of the character. Yeah, and that's why people tend, and also the writing. I am what my friend Bernardine Evaristo referred to once as a prose stylist. I like that description so much. I never forgotten it. It's about 10 years ago she said that. Yeah. So there you go. Long answer for a short question.
Francine?
Yeah, actually, you answered a couple of the other questions. You touched on the fact that you could use your crime novel to expose things in society, and that's one of the things that I noticed as I was reading. As I was reading, I thought, "Gosh, yes, it's a crime novel, but here it seems to me like it's a vehicle to expose the societal issues on this post-colonial island." And one of the issues that I picked up on and we wanted to ask about was the fact that you describe many of the characters by their skin color.
Yes.
He was dark
Yeah. Yeah.
skinned and he was light
Yes.
skinned or
Yeah.
cinnamon
Yeah.
colored, and is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
societal issues that
Yeah.
you wanted to touch on in the
Yeah.
novel?
Yes. Certainly. And I got that from reading, really reading Toni Morrison. And also thinking about, what Andrew Salkey, who died some time ago, he was a very important Caribbean writer, as you know, when he came to England. And Salkey talked about it, for him, his literary mission as a writer was to dignify his people. Now, for me, that is my manifesto, to dignify my people. And when I present this wonderful salad of characters, men, women, you know, in all their beauty. I mean, and I'm doing the shadism thing, but I'm saying to people, you see, you can do it this way too. Who was Digger's first girlfriend? Digger was into this girl called Lonnie, if you read the first book, very dark skinned. He likes a dark skinned woman. Bessie is cinnamon, yeah, she's beautiful conventionally. But give him Lonnie. And for him, Lonnie is magical also because of her color. He loves her darkness. And Toni Morrison does that too. I don't know if you've read, for example, Song of Solomon, when she describes this character called Pilate, or Pilate, Pilate. Pilate, she describes her lips as wine dark. Oh my God, that's poetry, you know? And there's a way she's loving the character and saying, you see, she's black. And look at what she's got. Look at the magic she possesses. So I have a military novel, Pinter Bender, I call it. People call it Pinter Bender. Pinter is a dark skinned guy. He's gorgeous. His girlfriend is very light skinned, Tinel, but she's gorgeous too. So I'm doing that, and I'm saying to you that also, I'm not going to generalize, but in my reading of a lot of European literature, and that's what most of us have grown up on, my generation and stuff, characters, they might have variety, but they are quite monochromatic. Is the Caribbean, if there is one thing that the Caribbean is not, is monochromatic. Man, we got shades and color to give away. And that is what I'm doing when and I hope people don't read it wrongly and take offense at it. But I'm trying to say, look at, it's like a fruit basket of humans. Mango, avocado, guavas. Have a look. It's a bouquet of humans. You get me? And that's what I'm into. I'm there to dignify my people. Full stop. And they get it. The European readers, they absolutely get it. Some might go in a huff, about it. But one thing they can't say is that as a writer, even when I present them as doing pretty awful things, you cannot deny the fact that I love those people as a writer. They're my people, and I identify with them. Simple.
Paula, you want to jump in here?
Yeah. We One of the things we noticed is that oppression is in this novel. You deal with oppression. You show it occurring on all levels of the society. The children, for example, there are children who are being oppressed by the drug dealers. Juba Hearst oppresses the whole of Cara Island. Um, then, of course, there's the historical oppression of Miss Stanislaus by Juba Hearst. Decima Manil who is upper middle class, is oppressed by her husband. So what I perceive is a pattern of oppression, which it goes through the whole spectrum of the society. And I was
Yeah.
wondering what you were discussing there.
Yeah.
What did you want to
Yeah.
show us?
So yeah, it's a wonderful question, because again, that's one of my big things. Look, Caribbean society is like what Walter Rodney said. Walter Rodney said Caribbean plantation society was founded on an economy that was designed to kill, meaning that the European plantocracy, when they came, they had worked out, they did a kind of mathematics, especially in Latin America, right? They had a kind of mathematical thing. It's almost like what you do with insurance at the moment. And they decided that if I work this man or this woman to death, they will last me 25 years, and it's cheaper to work them to death and to buy another batch of slaves than to look after them and keep them alive. Some people do that, with animals, or they should do it with animals too. That was a calculation. What Rodney pointed that out. Caribbean society was founded on violence. Caribbean society is a society from the very beginning, right? The early peoples who were there, what I call the first people of the Caribbean, they were wiped out. The Caribbean, as we know it, had its roots in a kind of genocide, okay? And it was replaced by another kind of genocide, which is the bringing of Africans and whatever it is to the Caribbean. Our society was constructed on violence. And you know what happens? We, as Caribbean people, have, especially the Caribbean Africans, as I call them, some people say African Caribbean, we have internalized so much of it, and if you really want to get a sense of how that has become an important preoccupation for some of our intellectuals, you read George Lamming. George Lamming was the one who, I think personally, I think Earl Lovelace too, a few others, because Lamming always said, that the decolonization process is not a physical thing. We got to do that too, and we know that others like Frantz Fanon have been doing the work on it. But Lamming was the one, the Caribbean writer, who really, really was preoccupied with, and always felt that we haven't got it yet. We haven't embraced the agenda yet, and it's do that kind of thing. So when a mother thinks, and I have a short story that handles that. When a woman thinks that it's some kind of she gets some kind of social cachet by taking her daughter or her son, bringing him out in the yard, putting out a timbre and whip or a belt and cutting his ass, right? When a woman thinks that if my man don't box me or slap me, he don't love me. You understand? When as happened in Grenada, it's an insight I kind of came upon because I'm researching at the moment, where people tend they're so ready to respond emotionally rather than rationally to stuff. So if somebody offends me, rather than offend them back or just turn my back on them, I want to cuff them down. You know the expression cuffing down. When you have situations where people we have not learned the skills of negotiation. This is what I've always said was the problem with the Grenada Revolution when they killed each other off in 1983. These guys never learned the simple, elegant, necessary thing of negotiation. You don't agree with this person, you negotiate. You don't fall back on violence. Yeah, you don't do the thing that society has always taught you to do, right? And how did they settle it? In a classic historical Caribbean sense, they put 9 of their colleagues, including the Prime Minister, up against a wall and executed them. Yeah? And that is what we have to fight against. You know, the whole idea, a man, his wife or his woman gets him vexed. He wants a boxer. You want to hit her. You want to beat her because he feels he has the right to do it. That dare I say, is not just a Kamaho thing. That's a Caribbean thing. Yeah. And that is something which I think that we have to address, and in my writing, all the time it's there. Why? Because I lived through it. So in my book, it is all about violence. And also, if you look at Desi and her husband, Desi is posh. She's nice. I like her. Very much actually. But I'm showing you that violence doesn't only happen, with ordinary working class folks. You go all the way up there. Money doesn't make a difference. Wealth doesn't make a difference. The same kind of prerogative that a man feels he has over a woman, be he a guy who goes out there and cut grass to make a living, and the one who has the big house with the lawn and the orchard at the back of his house, he is still Grenadian or still Caribbean, and he behaves exactly like the one that he thinks whom he thinks he's better than. That's really what it's about. And we need to confront it.
I think I'm going to cede here to Kesua so she could ask her question about the Grenada Revolution, just because it comes on the heels of what you just said.
So,
Kesua?
Thank you so much for those thoughtful comments. And I think one thing that really jumped out at me with this novel was how the Grenada Revolution is really woven both into the background consistently, but at times it really comes to the forefront of the story as well. It becomes important. And it was unusual, I think, for me. I wasn't expecting it, rather, because the novel's set in a fictional space, Kamaho, rather than the physical, real Grenada. And I just kind of wondered, why did you think? Why did you make that choice? Why did you do that? Why was it that it was in the realm of the imaginary? Perhaps the revolution becomes a more palatable story, or more relatable, or more real. Anyway, more believable.
Nice. Yeah, nice one. Nice, good. One is because the reason why I'm in England is because of what happened to Ireland. I was a lot of people don't know this, but I was the director of cultural affairs in my country. I ran a whole ministry. I was responsible for cultural development when this thing happened. I came to England because the Americans invaded Grenada in 1983. I left in 1984 to come to England. The only reason why I'm here in England is precisely because living in Grenada under the administration, the American rule was untenable. And my mother, my sister, my brother, everybody wanted me to get out because they know me well enough to know that I don't put my mouth in bully to speak. I will speak out. I will object. And also the Americans were very keen to get young, bright people out of the country because we were the revolutionaries, we were the potential danger. So they'd offered scholarships to a lot of the people who returned to run the country in the 1990s. I came here, England, and I moved in and out. There's a time when I went to Grenada. That was about 10, 11 years after I stayed in England because I stayed away for a long time and upset my family really badly because I was silent for a long time. When I returned, I'd written one book. It's a very small collection of short stories called Song for Simone, and it was banned. They would not allow me and the other Grenadian writer that you all may have heard of, Merle Collins. We could not read in a public space. We were not allowed to read in a public space, so like a public library. We had to go to this place, the extramural department of the University of the West Indies, and one very interesting woman called Beverly Steele, she is a historian, who gave us the opportunity to read from our books of poems and short stories for the public. So, to answer your question, and that has been my great trauma. It's never left me. What I am today is directly a result of that. The whole island was traumatized, and I mean the word seriously now, because I don't know, you're all young. It's about 40 years now, but the Grenada Revolution represented for a lot of Caribbean people, especially the Caribbean left, the hope Some people hated it, the middle classes, but people saw a real. It's like, you know, this is the way to negotiate our way out of a certain kind of dependence. Let me give you an example, right? They had their faults. There's a lot of problems going down there too, eh? Loads of issues going down there too. But let me show you what happened in Grenada over that period of time. Between 1979, and I wasn't in the country, I was in France, I was studying, and 1983, education was free. Education became free. Health was free. They don't have the resources, but health was free. They introduced pension, a kind of a minimum wage. They had a Ministry of Women's Affairs run by a woman minister, right? And the population moved from a literacy rate of about 72% or something like that to 96%. The only island in the Caribbean that had such a high ratio was Barbados. Yeah. And in other words, Grenada educational level was the equivalent of Britain at the time, you know, at the end of that, you know, the literacy rate of a country. So it represented some kind of, and that is what was destroyed. You know, forget about the killing of the prime minister and you know, his lover and 6 other men. Yeah, we had factories. You know what I mean? I think the St. Lucians took it. Who was the prime minister of Dominica at the time? Was it Eugenia Charles? Yeah, Dominica took it. They took the factories. That was reparation. That was Eugenia Charles. Literally, we had an industry where we made you know, all the mango that fall and spoil on the ground and go over and stuff. We found a way to make nectar, tin them, put them in, and sell them. That's what they think we did. And when the Americans came, they all of that was destroyed. A lot of it was dismantled, and it went to, I think it's to Dominica. I think it was Eugenia Charles. I don't know what they did with it, but Grenada's little industrial base was shifted and taken over there. So that's what we lost. Yeah, and that's why when I go to Grenada now, there's a kind of amnesia. Grenadians don't want to talk about it. They don't want to. It's like, you know, like slavery. If you talk to the average Caribbean person about slavery, they say, "Oh, they don't want to talk about it." You know, even if you show them the fact that it's the past, but it's still very present in terms of the way we behave, in terms of our attitudes to women. You know, our attitudes to human sexuality. You know, all that stuff. They don't want to hear it. In Grenada, there's a kind of willful amnesia where people don't want to remember it because it had been so uprooting. And that's what my next book is about. My next book is a book that's based on that sits right there. So I'm preoccupied with it, and it crops up in my writing. But also, it's true that his mother would be part of that revolutionary. She would have been part of that process. Very few have been quite progressive, you know, and as most Grenadians still are, they're very progressive. You know, there's certain things you just don't, you know, the kind of liberties that people in Barbados and Antigua, that these foreigners take with the locals. They can't do that in Grenada. Grenadians will run them out of the country, as I did with a guy called Brownlow. An Englishman decided to block the beach, and he owns the beach, and we can't go on the beach. Within 2 weeks, he was back in England, Lord Brownlow. You understand? Some time ago, the Prime Minister, but he's out now, tried to sell a park that bordered on the beach that Grenadians love, a little park, you know, for kids to run around in, to sell it off to some developer. Within 5 days, he had to retract. He had to say that he never ever, that was a mistake. He never intended, or was one of his ministers who you know, because he knew, you know, fire going to burn him.
Thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah, in terms of the whole what you described as amnesia, I think it came across in Black Rain Falling and in the Bone Readers as well, because here's Digger fighting for answers into what happened to his mother, and I think it was Chilman who just sort of told him, you know, you should kind of forget about that. Don't get anybody angry. Let bygones be bygones. It's water under the bridge. I think that was that sort of you hinting at what might be happening in Grenadian society?
Yeah, I mean, one of the Grenada's greatest problem, which Grenada doesn't acknowledge, I think, is the missing body. Let me explain to you what I mean by that. The first Grenada has always been quite a rebellious little island. Yeah? It took the Europeans 100 years before they could even set foot on the island. You know, because the natives there, the people there, just wouldn't let them land, right? But they eventually landed. Okay, and not long after, just after the French Revolution, in 1790 something, 72, I don't remember. Haiti, with Toussaint Louverture and that lot, decided that they're gonna follow the French, you know, Égalité, Libre, Fraternité, and Liberté, Fraternité, and they decided they wanted their independence too. So the Haitians put up a fight against the French. You know, keep that in mind. And 2 years later, 1795, there's a guy a Grenadian guy called Fedon, Julien Fedon, decided he's going to do the same thing as the Haitians do. So we had the first Red Revolution in Grenada in 1790. And he fought the British for 1 year. The only reason why he lost that war is because he was not able to capture St. George's, or else our history would have been very different. So it's an island that has always been quite, you know, very much like that. In the 1950s, we had another revolution with this guy who came in and turned out to be a dictator in the end, but he was very important for Grenada, a guy called Eric Gairy. And Gairy was the one who introduced unionism, wage labor. Right, he destroyed the whole system of serfdom. You know, where people work, you know, for the kind of absentee plant. And then, of course, in 1979, another revolution. So we have a fair share of that, you know, and that is the proud history that they have tried to make Grenadians forget. But what they do not realize is that it's in the blood. So take, for example, let me give you an example. There are several important sites in the country which are of great symbolic importance to Grenadians. They don't even know it, but it's there. It's the place where Morris got, quote unquote, indicted to be killed. It's a house that overlooks the harbor. Yeah. What did the last Prime Minister do? He decided to build the House of Parliament on top of that, right? It's a kind of erasure, right? They decided to conflate. I think it was I can't remember exactly, about one important day, you know, that we celebrated during the revolution, to conflate that with what they call independence, the day the Americans arrived. In other words, trying to wipe away all the old, old important psychological symbols by canceling them out with, and that is not his idea. He's not bright enough to come up with that. It's his American advisors, the State Department, CIA, or whoever it is. They are the ones who advise him to do that. But in other words, to tamper with the profound, hard-earned symbols of Grenadianness, yeah, and by replacing them or distorting them, or whatever, that's what they do.
I'm gonna jump in here, if I may, and ask another question if I can. I mean, when I asked the question about the Grenadian Revolution, it was because it felt so present in the novel, but so kind of like a scepter almost in the background, sometimes coming to the fore. And the way you talk about it with such passion and depth and knowledge, obviously because of your role that I didn't know about, but I did wonder if that 1984 date, because I think it's quite clear that you arrived in England in 1984, and that,
yes.
There was I did wonder if that was related to the end of the revolution. I do kind of, the other question I want to ask is, you mentioned another book where you might feature the revolution. Would that be another book in the series, the crime series, or would that be a separate?
No, that's separate. That's book 2 to the first literary novel I wrote, called Painter Bender. and you should read it. You should read what, or if you don't read it, read what John Lee. John Lee, John R. Lee. I think he's Saint Lucian. He does all that sort of stuff. Go and read. Hear what he says about the book. It didn't take off. It came out the wrong time. The publishers who didn't, I don't think that they were ready for a book like that. And somebody who read it recently told me basically that the book, it was long. It was at least a decade before its time, but it's worth reading it because it gives you a sense of what it meant to be. Well, all the islands would have experienced that. It's just that it's that period in our history when we, as a people, were just about to step into the 20th century, to move out of, the 19th century. All that meant, the kind of serfdom. When you had in the Caribbean, you had monocultures, like, for example, Dominica, you all had, was it Roseau? Where you all had, sugar cane for some parts and bananas for, and all of that went to England, right? These, sugar cane for the sugar and the rum until they needed it no more because it was replaced by beetroot. When the Caribbean was a plantation whose sole economic structure was to feed the needs and the resources to feed of the colonizing powers. Yeah, there was a time when the Caribbean was that. When in fact when we had what we call monocultures, when the dominant crop was a crop that the people in the islands could not use. When for example, you in Grenada we grow some of the best cocoa in the world. That's a fact. It's not a boast. Jamaica, some of the best coffee in the world. But we're going to still go in the shop to buy a bottle of coffee or to buy Ovaltine or Milo. Do you understand? Because we could not make the connection between the raw cocoa we produced and put on the ship belonging to Geest Industries with the cocoa that we grow. You understand? And we moved out of that. That was the period when we broke out of that completely, the Caribbean, right? And you have to go back to leaders like Eric Williams, Burnham in Guyana, is this Bustamante or Manley in Jamaica? Those are the ones who literally broke us out of that, and that was the beginning of independence, which England didn't give us. We took.
Francine, you want to jump in here as we're starting to come to the end?
I just wanted to say that I actually have read Pinter Bender. I read it many years ago, and I
Okay.
plan to reread it. And I have been encouraging the group to read it as well. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say, Maljay.
Yeah, it's a slow book, but you take your time with it. It's not a book written, it's a book written for. It's the kind of book you have to immerse yourself in. You can't go reading it as though you want a strong plot or whatever it is. But it's a book that says it's a song to the Caribbean and to Grenada. It's a book that says this is where we've come from. This is who we were. This is what we aspired towards. This is what happened on the way. Yeah, and this is where we are now.
I just had one sort of brief question based on the novel and how it was written, because I'm from St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay.
I naturally speak a Creole, but reading the novel, it came naturally to me. But I realized in terms of the spelling of some of the Creole words, they were quite unique, and I've never seen such spelling before. So I was wondering whether you devised that yourself, or maybe that's a Grenadian thing that I'm just not familiar with.
No, there's the hardest part of the book to write, and in a way, it's what people buy the book for and what people reject the book for. There's a kind of reader out there who they don't want to hear it, they don't want to read it. For them, it has to be in standard English, right? In fact, for some of them, the character has to be white, Yeah, because they can't imagine a black Miss Stanislaus or a black digger. You know, there are people who are like that. That's what they call it. What you call the default. And I'm planning to do a whole kind of semiological analysis with my students on that. People who they just do not want to identify or emotionally or to bring themselves into an imagined space where there are people who are not like them, and more specifically with black people. There are people that are, and and sometimes they don't even know why. Sometimes they do, but having said that, there are again, and many of them are English actually, because some of the best readers you find probably in the world are some of the English readers. I'm talking about white English, yeah, who loved the difference, they love the opportunity to get into a space that they would not otherwise have had the opportunity to enter. And some of the best readers of my book are white middle class English people. That's a fact. Um, about the language, the Creole language, it's the hardest thing, and all Caribbean writers who write, especially for a hybrid audience, have that difficulty. If you read some of the notes that Sam Selvon made to himself, I have had conversations with a few of them. Even Lamming, I remember many years ago, he came to Grenada, and I spent some time with him. And he just said to me, that's the big question. Ask yourself, what language shall I write in? Because unlike St. Lucian Creole and Martinican Creole and Guadeloupean Creole, it's not written down. We have not codified it on the page. The Anglo-Caribbean Creole is not written. So we don't have a standard that we need to follow. What we do is give approximations of how it sounds or how it might sound. So we tend to write phonetically, not phonetically, phonemic, as opposed to writing the phonetics of the language, the orthography. I have a friend who just a couple of days sent me a note asking me, to have a look at their work based on, because they're writing Caribbean Creole and they're having issues with it. Some of them have managed a nice fit, they kind of do a marriage between English and, I think the writers who really achieve this really well and don't seem to have a problem are people like Ingrid Persaud. I think she, people love her book, and Ayana Gideon Lloyd. Nobody seems to have a problem with her style, as we say, the way she does it. So maybe I have to go and study what they did, and see how they did it, because some of them have issues, man. Like you, Roll. They seem to find it difficult. I find it easy. Just say it out loud. And just say it out loud. Mm-hmm.
Or listen to the audiobook. Thank you very much for that one. Just one very brief final question. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? Present View.
By Celeste Mohammed.
Yes, by Celeste Mohammed. It recently won the Bocas Litfest Prize. Well, thank you very much for this interview. And to end, we're going to have a reading by Jacob Ross himself. Would you stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you the next time.
This is an extract from Black Rain Falling, and this is where my main character, Digger, the night before, he's arrested a policeman who ran over a woman and didn't stop, because the police officer was drunk, and he just kept driving until somebody stopped him, and people were absolutely, really, really very angry about it. Now, this is not a made-up scene. This actually happened when I was in the Caribbean, in Grenada, a few years ago. This is a woman, a real woman, and whatever. And Digger, my main character, he is coming down from visiting a friend. He's coming on the road, driving from visiting a friend in another parish, and he comes up on this accident, and he got so angry at this policeman who's run over a woman and didn't stop the vehicle. And when the guy asked him, well, how come he didn't stop? The guy found out that the guy is drunk, one. And two, the policeman said he thought it was a dog. And so what the guy did, the guy arrested him. That's his fellow officer. He arrested the guy. The guy was drunk. Dragged him over, you know, to the police station. Put him in the cell and then locked him up in there and took the key home. At 9 o'clock exactly, I received a call from Staff Superintendent Gill of St. Andrews Central Police Station. He demanded the keys up to the cells in the building. Didn't I know that a police officer never arrested another officer in public, no matter what they did? And they certainly didn't lock them up overnight and take away the keys. Where did I get my training? He asked. Who the hell did I think I was? Detective Constable Dixon, sir, I said. St. Andrews CID. 2 years serving, and I'm asking you to read the report I left with your duty officer before you start to insult me. That's no excuse, he snapped. I want the keys. When you're bringing it in? When I'm ready, I replied and hung up. I left my house at 11 a.m., the jail keys in my pocket. I took the long road to the office in St. Andrews. Chief Officer Malan called. I didn't pick up. 5 minutes later, Officer Admin Pet texted me, where are you? I didn't reply. The chief officer phoned again. I ignored him. Then Miss Stanislaus' number popped up. Good morning, Miss Stanislaus, I said. How are you? Miss Adiga? She said, you asking for trouble? No. Why you lock up the policeman? He killed a woman last night, Miss Stanislaus. Drunk driving, and he's not getting away with it just because he's an officer. I didn't know, she said. You planning to fight them? That's for the family of the victim to do. Ask Pet to get a lawyer who's prepared to take the case on a no-win, no-fee basis. Right? I'll give Pet the details when I get in. Send the details now, Miss Stanislaus said. And her whole tone had changed.